Focusing on the new leaders, we're going to have the next skill, which is in one of the most difficult ones. And this is something that, we find very hard to train as well, that we see companies struggling with. No matter where you're at, it's the toll of difficult conversations, what it can do to you mentally, emotionally. No one wants to have those difficult conversations. How can we make them easier? And if you're in people, no matter what happening, especially if you just went through everyone went through the pandemic, it was brutal for everyone. If you're in like crisis comms, it doesn't matter. You're going to have a lot of these conversations, and it doesn't matter what leader you are. It's relevant to everyone, executive, and someone newly hired, every role, it's relevant. So
yeah,
my question, my question to Lena is going to be, so let's start off first. What is a difficult conversation? Who usually encounters them, and why are they so hard to have?
okay, what's the difficult conversation? I'll give a bit of a broad answer. It's all kinds of conversations that makes you feel uncomfortable, that they trigger an emotional response. So, and they prohibit you from going the way that you would usually have a conversation. So you immediately change, and then you're like, you have an emotional response to this conversation. So there, it's difficult for you. And what is difficult for you? It's different for another person, of course.
Right.
Yeah. So I think this would be my best attempt to define what's a difficult conversation. Then several examples of people having difficulties is with conversations that they know that the counter side has a different opinion. They cannot really connect with them in order to find a solution. Sometimes it's simply about delivering bad news or feeling that push somebody. Sometimes it's because they're people, they don't perform, so poor performances or poor performance reviews. Sometimes you unfortunately need to let somebody go, and this is also quite tricky. So these are different examples, and yeah, we all have them, we all go through difficult conversations, no matter in which level you are in the organization, but they're especially triggering for new leaders, just because they get into new tasks and they have like new teams, or it's for them their first time, so they don't have already a method on working with these difficult conversations or how to go about them. The wiser, the more senior you become, the more wiser, then you know how to handle this. Like when you have kids, first kid you don't really know, but with the second and third you're like
That's a really, really good point. Yeah, it's you need the feedback loop and understanding how to deal with it, and then you're getting better and better and better.
Yeah.
And it's very mentally taxing. I know a lot of people have had that tough word of burnout, or of saying I don't want to do this anymore. I'm doing this on a daily basis. I'm getting people are sad about it. Like a really difficult ones. Like you mentioned a lot of good examples. Like it hurts to know like, oh, I'm performing poorly, and I got to have a conversation, or like pit plans, letting someone go, like you talked about, bad news, pushing something that no one necessarily wants to do, but you have to do it, and it's emotionally taxing.
Yeah.
When we have those conversations, and what are the common resistances do you see when you're talking about this that come up in a difficult conversation, like deflecting, defensiveness? What are some common resistances that people usually encounter, and how to deal with this? How do you deal with this resistance? Yeah.
That's a great question, and I'd like to respond with two different subjects. So once we can discuss about the leaders themselves and what are their resistances, and the second I would like to discuss about the people who are resisting, so like their direct reports, their teams, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to their direct reports and everything, what you see is usually people go in as you said, deflecting or defending themselves and everything. What mostly happens is the fight, flight, freeze, or please, which is one of the newest additions. So people are they have emotional triggers to what is happening, and they push back, they fight, they defend themselves. Sometimes they're putting a wall, so they go into the freeze. They're like, okay, this doesn't, it's not for me. Most of times, especially with new leaders, you see that they're going into pleasing. So they say A, and then they go and they say, no, but it's okay. So they completely change it. They try to please, to satisfy the other side, because there is always the fear behind the fear. Oh, I'm going to lose this teammate. This team member is not going to like me anymore. It's going to disturb our work relationship. So which is the worst thing to do, of course, because then you're not coherent. You say A and then you change it completely. So this is one thing. And the other thing is with yourself, as a leader. I mean, everybody should, but as a leader, I think you should be super self-reflective in seeing, observing yourself while you're in the conversation. So a nice framework that I use comes from the transactional analysis, which works with which shows different states, ego positions. So you might be in the ego position of a parent, critical or nourishing. You might be in the ego position of a child, a rebel one or a submissive one, or of an adult. So there's these 5 ego positions. And usually when a person is in the mode of having a difficult conversation and there is resistance on the other side, unfortunately, we usually jump into being a parent. So we are in the parent role, either a critical parent, no, you shouldn't have done this way, no, or a nurturing parent. So you understand the difference. Well, the best is, of course, we fall in the trap all the time, but imagine if I go into a critical parent, in which ego position will my teammate go?
The mad child,
yeah, exactly.
or defensive, or I'm gonna be a teen, depending on how old I am, and be like, ignore you and or say something bad that I didn't want to say.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So immediately you force the other person into going to the either submissive child or the rebel child. Well, the idea is that the moment that you observe that this is happening, try to change role, change ego position, to go into maybe the adult with the logic, talk with logic and everything. So these are things that a leader is good to have, like for leaders, it's good to have such frameworks like transactional analysis, and a couple of frameworks we can discuss a bit further, the 5 lines freeze. And I have another one that's also pretty useful, that they can start observing themselves in the situation and see, okay, now I'm really a super nurturing parent. I think here I need to go into the adult stage, or so to support a bit of change on the other side.
That's actually, you transitioned perfectly into what I want to do, which is those frameworks exactly, and demonstrating and talking about what they might be and how to learn them. Can you talk about, because that's exactly the question, is what do you have a model or framework that you're using or you created that we can follow and you can and talk about to make those conversations easier? Like, what do I say to start? Do I come in, you probably heard the sandwich where it's like, oh, come in, like if I have to give bad news, like, hey, Lena, loved your project. Oh, you're so great. So anyways, you're fired. And then you go to the next, like, if you heard of these different, like these frameworks, I love to hear what you found to been successful, and especially, dealing with not just the individual who you're talking to, or maybe even the group, but also for yourself. So yeah.
Yeah, so these 2 models that we heard until now, so the transactional analysis model and also the fight, flight, freeze, which comes from neurobiology, very close to the embodied work that I'm doing when I'm working with such resistances, they come a bit later. The first thing that we usually do is the switch box model.
Swiss box?
Switch box, like when you have, like in your room, when you want to turn on and turn off the light, you have a
switch box. Okay, like a light switch. Yeah,
like
got it.
This is the model that can really help people when they want to learn how to go about difficult conversation. And this model has 4 pillars. They say that in every conversation there are specific elements, that there is a bit of like white noise in this element. So the earlier that you can identify the level of the conversation that there is this white noise, the easier you can make an intervention, and the easier you can work in this case. So the levels, there are 4. At first there is the content level, the second is the procedure, the next one is interaction, and the last one, the most difficult one, is the emotion. So when we talk about content, you can imagine them as like content, procedure, and then interaction and emotion. So the upper part and the lower part. So with content, we mean that it's all about what we are discussing. There is white noise, and what is the conversation about, what is happening, what is the topic, and this kind of, there is white noise in this part. The second one is the procedure. The procedure is when there is white noise in the length of the meeting, who is leading the meeting, for how many hours, how many times do we meet, like a procedural. So this, when there is white noise in this, can be that you think that, yeah, we had an interview today for 1 hour, and I thought, yeah, we had an interview for 45 minutes. So this can breed difficulty. So till now, it's an easy thing to understand. First, the content, second, the procedure. And when you define, okay, in which level of the conversation there is a problem, then you can clarify it. Then I can say, okay, then wait. Before we go to the next question, I had the impression that we are having the interview for 45 minutes. So I think we are completely out of time. So I'm trying to clarify it with you instead of piling up the anger and the bad energy. So the same thing with the content. Then you say, okay, we are in a meeting. I really thought we were going to talk about train the trainer, and all your questions are about coaching, mentoring, difficult. Like, what's up? Can you clarify? So it's easy with these two levels. When there is white noise in these two levels, it's very easy to go about it. Of course, it takes a bit of a sharp mind to think, this is the problem now. Let me bring it forward. Let me resolve it before we move to our conversation. So these are the easy things. The difficult comes when we go to the lower levels, to the interaction level and the emotions. So with the interaction is, imagine that we're having a conversation and you're interrupting me. You're not letting me talk, you don't explain, you don't give me space, time, you're not present. Let me give you an example. Like you have, like, imagine you have the interview and I would be like, yeah, what were you saying? Yeah. No, I'm following.
Yeah, I'm listening.
It happens very often that leaders, they have a conversation and somebody is checking their emails, checking their phone, things. So instead of piling things up, always bring the point up and say, okay, can we sync? Can we make sure that we have some ground rules of how we interact with each other? But also can go a bit further into, okay, how quickly do we respond to our emails? Maybe I had a different idea. Maybe I want to respond within 24 hours. Let's send some rules and not say, okay, you have to deliver the task and it's not a task. And another person said, no, but I thought I had to deliver it until the end of the day. So more of how often we interact, the frequency of the interaction, the quality of interaction. This is something that happens quite frequently, and it's already quite triggering. The most triggering is when the emotions come up, is when we are emotionally taxed and we are not able to be present in the conversation. And then it's really difficult for the person to deal with us, or we to deal with for us to deal with them.
Would that be an example, for example, like coming in and having this conversation, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about something that happened at home, or some news that I had that's totally, that's affecting the conversation? Or would these be emotions that are coming up as a result of the conversation?
Both, exactly. It can be that you had a problem at home, or you had like you were come from your previous meeting and there you're completely like influenced by that, and then the other person, of course, is going to go in a very emotional, trained moment, because they think it's something wrong with them, something is happening. So in this case, the best is to take a moment to stop and say, okay, I'm sorry, this and this has happened, without giving, of course, details, but I'm emotionally a bit charged right now. I had a situation at home, or there was a situation in my previous meeting. Can we take a moment? Can we take a deep breath together? This comes to embodied learning very much in. Can we slow down together? The same you do when we have a conversation and we see that we are going towards a disagreement, or it's a very difficult conversation. And usually we try to push into the content, the first circle that we talked about, the content. But what we need to address first is that oh, I understand. It's a difficult thing now to see. I'm upset. I see that you might getting upset too. How can we solve it together? It's more about understanding, naming it, in order to work with it. You see it very often when you have these very, very well-trained people. Here in the Netherlands, you see it very often because it's part, if you own even the smallest supermarket, then all the people in the cashier, they all know how to handle this case, because you have angry customers and then they go and they say, I'm sorry that this happens to you. Let me see how to fix it. Or this must be difficult. This must be energy draining. So take a moment to really acknowledge the emotion. That's the number one thing. So imagine you give somebody bad news. Imagine you have to let somebody go.
Right.
Don't start with excuses. It's the most horrible. The best way to start is that I have something to tell you. I'm touched. Of course, if you have to be authentic. When you give them the news, tell them this must feel really difficult. This must feel bad, and pause. I always teach now. We have so many things, but after that there is of course a very different steps that you need to take. But always remember that you need to pause. Tell people, acknowledge the situation, and give them the space to talk, to say, yeah, this sucks. It's really bad. I didn't expect it, or maybe they need to cry, or I mean, I'm taking now very negative examples. I don't know why, but
no, that's important, because I think demonstrating examples with the extremes, I think, makes it more clear.
yeah,
Because then you can apply it backwards too. I mean, and so please continue. And just some notes that I was thinking about. It's really because you also apply it to people who maybe wouldn't. I guess everyone could have the difficult conversation, but it seems like the light switch, or the box model, box switch model, it's a communications model that almost everybody should be
yeah.
really thinking about, not just for leaders, but this is something that everyone should be having.
Yeah, everyone,
It's
because we
amazing.
all have this kind of conversation. So
Wow.
that's really important to learn how to handle it. Because
Wow.
what's the trouble usually is that even when we identify there is a problem in one of these four. I'm sorry, I keep showing like a bubble because this is my visuals when I have the workshops. So either it's the content or the interaction or the emotions. These bubbles, the best is if you can identify and then bring it up, say it, because what we try to do is try to hide things under the carpet, and we try to push towards content. We try to, no, but we have this topic here. No, stop, take a moment, deal with the emotions, deal with the interaction, deal with where is the white noise, where you see the white noise happening the most, and then of course different steps.
Okay, this is cool. This is really, really cool. And I honestly, I think a lot of people, pretty much everybody, needs to learn this model, or at least approach it. And I know we have a time issue, but I'm going to ask with this, and then we can discuss after this. But how could we learn this model? Can we learn from you or resources? If someone listening, and it resonates with them as much as it did with me, as you were talking about. The only thing I was thinking about is how can I see Lena do a role play session? I kept thinking I really wanted you to walk me through examples, and you did some, but where else could people learn this? And is it like something online? Is it hiring someone like yourself that could train this? How would you recommend? Because this could be valuable for a whole company. Whole company everyone should be able to learn this. So what's the best way to acquire these skills?
Wonderful question, Dan. Wonderful question. So when it comes to a transactional analysis model that we discussed before, there is a YouTube video. We can put it in the comments that explains it beautifully. If you want to work with it, with the role play and everything, then you need to hire a person, of course, you have a vendor or something. When it comes to the fight, flight, freeze, also there is a lot online. I haven't found a good video, but I might create one in the future. Usually I give a small lecture on the topic, a very, very interactive one. I have to say, very interactive one. With the transactional analysis, also a super short, very interactive lecture, because I love exercise. So I immediately put people to exercise. So it's not that it comes from here, it goes away. So a lot of embodied work and exercising. When it comes to the sweet spot box model, we are a bit unlucky because there is bibliography, but only in Dutch. So if you speak Dutch, Google it. If you don't, I'm really sorry. Hire me.
You got to talk to you.
Yes, they can talk to me. And when it comes to the role play, as I told you, I always use a variety of exercise, so people really can practice every little thing. But I've seen that the role play is the most important, because after you've gone through the three models that we discussed, after you've done lots of exercises, and after you have showcased different ways of handling situations, because something also I think it's very important to showcase different techniques of working with individuals, but with teams as well. The next thing, for me, the capstone event of my trainings is a role play, where people bring their own challenges. That's, I think, the key, that people bring their own challenges of the different cases that they have. And then if I can quickly walk you through, I think that that's the secret. You work with groups of 4 or 5 people. That's the best number I've seen over the years. And the people who bring the case, they put it in a small bottle or something. And then somebody draws a paper. When you draw the paper, you become the person who is resisting. So you become a direct report. You don't show the challenge to anybody else. You just have to show the behavior. So let's say you have a person who is always late or somebody who never delivers. So you have to showcase experience, and you choose who you want to be the leader, but you're not allowed to choose the person who brought the case in. So you choose another person, this person becomes the leader, and then you role play the situation. What's really crucial here is to work with the group intelligence. So the leader knows that at any point they can just say, okay, stop, and turn to the rest of the group, to the other 3 people, and say, you guys, I have no clue how to deal with it anymore. Can you give me some tips out of what they've learned in the workshops and all the techniques or anything? And the people, instead of telling him or her, they can just step in and continue from where the person left. So they bring their own perspective. After every round, you have a debriefing moment. So you make sure that you discuss what happened, you discuss what were the best practices for you, what suits you with, of course, your own personality, your own style. You connect the dots, actually. This is what this role play does. It connects all the dots from the theory that you got, all the ideas, the approaches, and really brings the group intelligence together, because people are really resourceful, and it's a pity not to use this resourcefulness.